There is a good chance that Diddy could be eating dinner at his home tonight, a free man. And that's because an appeals court is now hearing the review of the trial in which Diddy was convicted of violating the Mann Act.
Sean Diddy has already spent 19 months behind bars out of a 50-month sentence. And now, there's a real possibility he could be released soon. In fact, he may have already served more time than what's typical for the charges he was actually convicted of, which usually carry a sentence closer to 15 months. By the time his attorney appeared in federal appellate court on Wednesday, he had already been incarcerated longer than many people would be for a similar offense. What makes the situation even more complicated is that the jury cleared him of the most serious accusations, including human trafficking and racketeering. Those major charges didn't stick at all. Then, unexpectedly, Melania Trump brought...
That may sound crazy, but I'm going to read you something from their brief. Listen to this. They say, freak-offs and hotel nights were highly choreographed performances involving the use of costumes, role play, and staged lighting, which were filmed so Combs and his girlfriends could watch this amateur pornography later.
Epstein controversy back into spotlight during a White House appearance, adding another layer of confusion to an already tangled case. Right now, two conflicting ideas seem to exist at the same time. On one hand, Diddy may have already overserved his sentence, while on the other, many people feel he avoided accountability for the most disturbing allegations. That contradiction isn't settling down anytime soon. It's like pressure building up with no clear release. The part most people avoid saying out loud is the real dilemma at the center of this case. If Diddy wins his appeal, if the judges accept the claim that those so-called freak-offs were protected under constitutional rights, he could walk free. But that kind of victory comes with a major implication. It would mean the conviction itself should never have happened in the first place. That's not a pardon. It's a declaration that the entire prosecution was flawed from the start. On the other hand, if the appeal fails, he remains in prison until 2028, while the public continues questioning why the most serious accusations didn't lead to convictions. Either way, it doesn't feel like justice is fully served. One outcome suggests a broken legal process. The other leaves people...
And this is the flight where Diddy said to her,
Showed her
he
the video.
testified
Showed her the
that
freak-off video.
he showed her a video of a freak-off that she participated in and said, if you don't participate in another freak-off when we get to New York, I'm going to put this video out. I'm going to send it to your mother.
And that's coercion.
She testified
if it's true.
to that.
If the jury
if they believed her,
yeah,
that's coercion.
That's
they would have cast.
Uneasy about unresolved allegations. There's no clean resolution here, only frustration on all sides. To make matters more uncertain, the appeals panel isn't giving an immediate decision. Instead, they'll release a written ruling weeks or even months later away from public view. That delay creates its own kind of tension. With no clear answer, speculation grows, and the situation feels increasingly unstable with each passing day. Then there's the issue of how the sentence itself was decided. In October 2025, Judge Aaron Superny...
So what they're saying is, look, if you want to use the Mann Act to prosecute people who are moving prostitutes across state lines for commercial transactions, which again is what it's usually used for, that's one thing. But here, there's no commercial purpose. Diddy lost money. He ended up paying the prostitutes. The films were never distributed to anybody. The defense is saying it was for his pleasure and the pleasure of people who may have been participating.
He's handed down a 50-month sentence, but the defense argues that decision crossed a legal boundary. They claim the judge factored in behavior for which Diddy had already been cleared, particularly a 2016 hotel incident involving Cassie Ventura, along with coercion claims that the jury did not uphold. According to the defense, considering those elements is not just questionable, it's improper, and appellate courts often overturn sentences on exactly these grounds, not necessarily because the defendant is innocent, but because the legal process wasn't followed correctly.
You know, let's have these
For whoever the new AG is this, you're right, is this a sign that this is going to be the approach?
That's right. And the other thing is that over the years now, some of these survivors, have been asked, are you ever going to name names? And they said, if it doesn't happen through the government, we will. And you wonder when that shoe drops.
Prosecutors, as expected, dismissed this argument outright. Still, the numbers raise eyebrows. A 50-month sentence is nearly 4 times longer than what's typically given for similar convictions. That kind of gap alone is enough to make appellate judges take a closer look. So what if the court side with him? It's not just about an early release for Diddy. By now, he may have already spent more time behind bars than what's normally given for the offense, roughly 4 months beyond the typical range, and that gap keeps growing. Each additional day he remains at FCI Fort Dix Pass, that expected limit starts to look less like standard punishment and more like a possible legal misstep. But this appeal goes beyond just arguing over the length of the sentence. His legal team is pushing for something far bigger. They want the entire Mann Act conviction tossed out. Their claim is that the so-called freak-offs were recorded, staged, and handled as private content, which they argue falls outside the scope of what that law is meant to criminalize. If that argument succeeds, the impact would stretch far beyond this one case. It wouldn't simply mean Diddy walks free. It could reshape how the Mann Act is interpreted and enforced going forward. That's the angle many headlines are overlooking. This isn't just about a high-profile figure trying to overturn a conviction. It's a legal battle that could influence the broader justice system in a significant way. But this is the point where the situation stops being only about Diddy. At the very same time his legal team was presenting arguments in a federal courtroom in New York, a completely different development was unfolding at the White House. On April 9th, 2026, Melania Trump stepped up to speak in the Grand Foyer and made a statement that caught almost everyone off guard. She firmly denied having any connection to Jeffrey Epstein. According to her, she never visited his island, never traveled on his plane, and never had any kind of relationship with him or with Ghislaine Maxwell. She went further, calling any attempt to associate her name with Epstein disgraceful and insisting that the narrative be shut down completely. What made the moment even more surprising was the reaction inside her own circle. Donald Trump later acknowledged that he had no prior knowledge of her statement. Even White House staff were reportedly unprepared. Just as public attention around the Epstein story had started to fade, her remarks suddenly pulled it right back into focus, reigniting a controversy many thought was cooling off. The First Lady didn't stop at simply denying any connection. Melania Trump went a step further and urged Congress to organize public hearings where Epstein survivors could testify under oath, ensuring their accounts become part of the official record. On the surface, it sounded like a push for openness and accountability, but many survivors didn't interpret it that way. Within hours, a group